Now I'd like to invite our panel up to the chairs and introduce our moderator first, Charlie Firestone. Charlie is the Executive Director of the Aspen Institute's Communications and Society Program and Vice President at the Aspen Institute, and a stellar moderator.
Thank you, Amy. As the panelists come to the stage, let me thank Amy for 2 years of excellent work. I've worked with her for 20 years, and this is really the culmination, and we're really proud of what you've done. We want to thank again the Deborah Jacobs and Jessica Dorr for their leadership at the Gates Foundation, and some of the other people here, including the Maureen Sullivan and the American Library Association, the IMLS and Susan Hildreth, Susan Benton, who I don't think is here, but has been a great help to us also with the Urban Library Council. So, a vision of people, place, and platform. We have a great panel. You have the bios at your desks, but at the far right over there is Mayor Karl Dean, the mayor of Nashville, which is actually the metropolitan government of the city of Nashville and Davidson County, where he's been the mayor since 2007. Then we have Linda Johnson, who is president and CEO of the Brooklyn Public Library, a 60-branch system serving over 2.5 million residents. She formerly was CEO of the Free Library of Philadelphia and the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. I mention that because we have another Philadelphian in a minute. Then Dinaw Mengestu, who's the LANNAN Chair of Poetics at Georgetown University and a well-known novelist, professor of creative writing. He's also was named a MacArthur Fellow in 2012, which is an incredible recognition. And finally, Ralph Smith, Senior Vice President of the Annie Casey Foundation, Managing Director of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. He is formerly on the law faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, and at one point was the Chief Operating Officer of the Philadelphia School District. So let's start with Mayor Dean. Mayor, Amy pointed out that one of the strategic opportunities was aligning libraries to community goals. How does Nashville do that? How do you think about how libraries can serve your broader community goals?
Well, there are two good examples of specific goals we had in our community where the library plays an instrumental role. I mean, overall, I think one of the things we want for Nashville is to be a city of lifelong learning, a city where people are curious about things, and the library is essential to that. But I would say the number one issue facing our community and probably any urban area in America is public education. And one of my desires as mayor has been to improve our schools, and the area where I thought we needed some improvement was in our school libraries. And so working with our libraries, we created a program called Limitless Libraries where we broke down the walls between the public library, which is part of the general government, and the school libraries. The city supplies the schools with its budget number and the money, but the schools are actually run by an independently elected school board. So it was a big deal when we said, look, we think it would be better if our libraries worked together and they bought things together so the economies of scale. It would be better if all the students had access to the wonderful things in our public library, which is an excellent institution, and then we just worked together. There was a lot of suspicion at first, but I give the schools a lot of credit, and I give our libraries a tremendous amount of credit for breaking down those suspicions and working through it. So now we have the Limitless Libraries, which is the name of the program, in all of our public schools. Any one of our students in public schools can order a book from our library and get that book delivered within a day or two, 2 days at the maximum. Circulation has gone up about 78%. The number of kids holding library cards has tripled or quadrupled. You've got kids who are getting music, they're getting videos, they're getting books. And our public library, just by doing this agreement, we increased by about 2 million volumes the number of books available to kids. So it's been a wonderful success. And then one of the things we've done is we worked with the Ingram Foundation to start remodeling school libraries themselves to make them the best room in the school, which is my goal, to see it as a place where everybody wanted to hang out. So we did 2 under the grant, and then the city started supplying money out of our general budget to remodel schools. We did 2 more this past year, and we're doing 2 this year. And hopefully that continues on for the library that becomes the center of the schools. The other program I want to mention is dealing with immigration. Nashville is kind of a, people will be surprised to know, is a very, very much an immigrant city right now. We have probably the largest Kurdish population in the United States, significant Hispanic, Somalian population. It's a big part of the city's success and the city's prosperity. But there are a lot of issues that come along with it. So this idea, which is not original to us, we received some recognition for limitless libraries. At the same time, Los Angeles received in the same publication recognition for their program with immigration. And so I did what any good mayor would say. I said, just copy that, would you? And Los Angeles was tremendously cooperative, and we worked with the Immigration Service, and we started New American Corners in our libraries where people can get on the path to citizenship, learn about English language programs. And again, our libraries have done a great job of integrating that into the community.
Sounds like other people could be starting to copy Nashville. One other just quick follow-up question, which is, as you do these things, do you see that as part of the strategy towards long-term sustainability of the Nashville Public Libraries? Do you connect those
definitely. There's a lot of great things going on in our libraries. Our librarian is here today, and he's done a wonderful job. But I think having the library be responsive to community needs will keep the library strong. And I can tell you, just as a mayor, a political figure, we've built, we're opening 2 libraries in the next month and done lots of remodeling. And there is nothing that I do that is more popular than that.
Okay. Linda Johnson, when you were part of the dialogue, I remember a statement you made at one point which said, libraries have turned from a house of books to a house of learning. And part of learning is getting access to content. What are some innovative ways or ways you think about how the people of Brooklyn are getting access to content through the library?
First, I wish I was working in Nashville because I've been trying to build a library for a couple of years and it's not so easy, actually. Access, I think, is, of course, the critical thing. The question is access to what? And we're trying to broaden always the definition of literacy so that I think in Deborah's opening remarks, she talked about the fact that this whole program that the Aspen Institute has been developing builds on a long tradition. The tradition was access to books, and now we're going from sort of a lending situation to a sharing situation, and how we can, in fact, bring people not only to access the material that we have, and it's extensive, and it's also important to note that we don't just have books. We are trying to build collections that allow people to access knowledge and information on whatever platform they're most comfortable. And in this group, you probably won't be as shocked as many that I tell this, but we have everything from ebooks to microfiche. And the reason is there's material out there that hasn't been digitized yet, and there are people who aren't comfortable yet in using digital information. So we are trying to make sure that everybody has access to information in ways that they're comfortable, and then also to be elevating the skill sets that people have so that as we move forward, our patrons are also able to be on the right side of the digital divide. I hate that expression exists, but it's real, and it's really, as you all know, a really bad place to be if you're on the wrong side of it. So the library has become a place where people are working together and also playing together. I want to also stress that. So it's important that that libraries are centers for learning, for job seekers, for new Americans, for people who are learning to speak English. But it's we're even doing work helping in communities where there are that are in transition, and there are populations that are speaking Russian and Spanish and Chinese, and there are programs now that allow for translation between languages other than English and a primary language. And that's very exciting to me because it makes for a healthier community. But the key is also that people can learn from each other, and that we'll do a better job if we listen to the community, because at the end of the day, the access to what, which is where I began, is really determined by that community. Communities are experts in knowing what they need, and we need to be listening to make sure that we're providing services to meet those goals.
So, Dinaw, your novels are some of the content that people are accessing, but you also are going out into the community and using libraries in ways of connecting with younger people. How do you see the role of libraries as you extend out to meet the younger generation?
Amy had a wonderful line, the idea that part of what our libraries can do is they can help make our civic identities. And oftentimes in the past, what writers or authors or content creators would do is we'd go to a library, we'd do a reading, and we'd sort of walk away. And what I've noticed over the past few years is that there's been an active sort of engagement between libraries and authors to actually do more than just sit and read in front of an audience, but to actually reach out to communities, to reach out to different stakeholders that oftentimes aren't engaged in those conversations. So with a problem like immigration, and particularly in Seattle, where the Seattle Public Library does a great community-wide reads event, where as an author you're able to go into communities that oftentimes haven't been represented either publicly or inside of their libraries, and they feel like now here's a chance to actually take an author or take a text and engage in a conversation that might not have happened otherwise. And so the library's physical space is transformed into one of not just having access to resources, but into engaging in a form of civic dialogue that oftentimes doesn't get to happen, especially for communities that are underrepresented. So minority communities that wonder, how do I actually access a library? What's the value of my being represented in a library? And suddenly now you can bring in authors and ask them to do more than just read. You can bring in authors and ask them to serve as facilitators for conversations that oftentimes are vital and are difficult to have.
So, Ralph Smith, your foundation has this whole program to get children to be proficient readers by third grade. And you were a chief operating officer of a school district, but you're going to the libraries in this effort. How do you see the role of libraries in this very commendable effort to address reading by the third grade?
Let me first begin by thanking Susan Hildreth for making me the favorite nephew of my favorite aunt, who is a librarian. Because of Susan's enthusiasm and embrace, I have begun to think much differently about libraries, much to the delight of my favorite aunt. She was my favorite aunt. I wasn't sure I was her favorite nephew. I am well on my way toward that status. And it is because as we have moved this idea that has become the campaign for grade level reading, that it is important to the point of being urgent that low-income kids read proficiently by the end of third grade, that the data pretty convincing that kids who read proficiently by the end of third grade graduate from high school. Those who don't are in serious trouble, especially low-income kids. As we have moved this out from an idea to a campaign that now involves 152 communities across the country, there's no set of institutions that have been more enthusiastic, that have been more engaged, and that have been more helpful than the public libraries across the country. And Susan, no, I say that in every audience, even the audience where there's no one representing the library. There are very few of those. Because in many respects, the librarians were the first help desk. They were the first navigators. They essentially understand what it means when we say that kids are not going to read proficiently in third grade if so many of them are not ready for school, so many of them are not showing up for school, and so many of them experience a summer slide. And in many respects, libraries are saying, raising their hands and say, we've been saying this all along. And that's why if you're here in the New York Public Library almost any time of day, you realize it is a unique intergenerational institution with parents and kids in various programs around the building. That's what we mean by school readiness. And during the summer reading programs that are sponsored by libraries across the country, they stand between students and the summer slides. So we have learned quite a bit about the library. And I'll offer two observations that we've drawn from the work. One, this notion, by the way, I love it, this notion of the value proposition being about people, place, and platform. Because in many respects, many of the interventions and supports that we need to help families get their kids reading proficiently really are best when they're a combination of high tech and high touch. And there's no place where that happens better and where it is more likely to happen than in libraries. The second observation really goes to this, this aligning and conjoining that happens here at the library. There's a way in which the library stands as an antidote to an evidence movement that is becoming sort of a new religion. And what libraries remind us by their very existence and by the way they operate and the way they function within communities is that knowledge really comes from disciplined research. It comes from reflective practice, and it comes from the wisdom of lived experience. And it is in the context of a library that we can get those three forms of knowledge, blend them together into something that's enormously powerful. And so that enduring contribution is something we've come to appreciate as we have worked with communities across the country and worked with and learned from the libraries. It's an exciting opportunity for us, and this report, I think, underscores what we're learning every day in every city across the country.
So we've seen 4 great leaders in this field are connected to the field, and the topic we haven't really touched on yet is leadership. And I guess my question for the panel, quickly, is how do we prepare more community leaders to understand the crucial and new role of libraries going forward? We seem to have an enlightened mayor on our panel, but Mayor, how do we get other cities to copy your model or to get it in the realm of libraries?
The key thing, anything in sort of public policy, is to talk about it. I mean, if libraries are an important value that you have for your city, you need to talk about libraries. You need to be involved in libraries. And so there's something that I believe in, so it's been easy for me to want to be involved in library programs, to want to help as I can. And I think the growth area there for libraries in terms of being involved in providing answers to community needs and providing, I think the video did a great job of this, on providing a place, a community space for people to talk to each other and to be sort of a living room is a great thing. And I think you just need to talk about it. You need to use the bully pulpit, and people will follow and get involved in them. I think one of Nashville's great strengths has not been so much the political part, has been the private sector, which has, like many cities, has formed a foundation that has made supporting the libraries a big part of our city's culture. And encouraging things like that, I think, spreads the word.
Any other thoughts? Because the other question is, librarians have an increasing leadership role in a community. In this vision, the librarian is a true community leader. How do we foster leadership qualities, more leadership qualities in the librarian community?
Well, first of all, of course, talking about it, and Tony and I, we feel like we're talking about it to our elected officials day in and day out, and they get it. But I think what we're trying to focus on in Brooklyn right now is that there are great community leaders in every part of the borough who are doing important work that we can actually help. And that if we figure out, as I said, we need to listen to the community to determine what their needs are. If we can help the people who are doing great work in each community, that it will be reciprocated. If we can bring a wonderful author not only in to give a great talk about his or her work, but then also to help a group of burgeoning writers figure out how they too can have a career that involves writing or literacy, that the work that we're doing will become more relevant, and the more relevant we become, the greater the prospect of sustainability will be. And then, of course, having the Aspen Institute, an independent third party talking about our needs is very helpful. I see folks here from the Center for an Urban Future doing the same thing. It's been a long time that librarians have been saying this, but it's always helpful when you have somebody else with a lot of credibility and an independent voice echoing it.
You know, I'll echo both comments, and the question reminds me of a consultative conversation we had at the start of the campaign with a select group of journalists. And they were very supportive of the campaign, but almost to a person they say, oh, this is not going to make it as a story. They say it lacks the dynamic tension. They say, who's opposed to kids reading on grade level by the end of third grade? There's nobody opposed to it, and therefore there's no story. It was really a revelation in many respects, but to some extent, the library's success as this durable, beloved institution may be part of the problem. And it was somehow, and we really had to take this on, say, we're not going to go cause a controversy to get coverage. We want the media to lift this up as an important issue. And it feels to me that the challenge to the media is to recognize the resource that is the library and make a determination to cover it, to lift up the good stories, to come here and talk about the number of kids who were here during the summer, to talk about the contributions and to make that more manifest to the community and not wait for controversy to occur. And I think that's part of the challenge, but it's also a great opportunity because the mayor is right. Everybody out there would love to read a good story about their library because we all, when we think about the library, all get warm and fuzzy and mushy and we begin to tell stories about the library. And I think those stories will find an audience, and we've got to do a better job of encouraging our leaders and our media to tell more of those stories more often.
Dinaw?
I mean, what I've noticed in the past is that great librarians are often great networkers, right? They know what the needs of their communities are oftentimes better than other civic leaders, and great librarians are able to sort of tap into all the different community leaders and get them to actually participate in these sort of dialogues. So doing an event in Arlington, I watched these amazing librarians bring together all the different stakeholders in Ethiopian and immigrant communities to come together to sort of not just have a conversation, but to actually sort of invite people who might not have normally been inside of the library space to say, well, now actually we're going through this extra effort of reaching out to you. And once that step happens, you realize that community members then return back to the libraries and ask them to help support their needs as well. And this great dynamic conversation begins to happen between librarians and between the communities that they're hopefully trying to serve.
It's interesting because a lot of times these are framed as issues and problems, but what this vision does, it states the vision and then looks at them as real opportunities, and the area of the opportunity to align the library to the community's needs and problems, the opportunity to get access to so many different forms of content or different ways of access, the opportunity to to have new sustainability models for libraries, and finally, the opportunity to build leadership both in the community and at the library level, and all the champions for libraries, I think, offers a great picture going forward.
Okay, Thank you, Charlie. I'd like to thank the panel, too, for your tremendously insightful remarks and really kickstarting what I hope will be a robust conversation going forward. I thought I'd take just a minute to talk about what is coming after the release of the report. The project, the Dialogue on Public Libraries project, has two phases. The first was the development of our vision report and getting it out to the public. And the second phase, which we're now going into, is to define engagement and action around this report. So in the coming months, we will be defining a series of activities for convening different stakeholder groups, for trying to engage more policymakers in talk and discussion around the ideas in this report, and identifying ways that from community to community, there may be models, practices, approaches that are effective in driving more rapid transformation across the country. Because while there are a tremendous number of libraries, as in Nashville, as in here in New York, in Philadelphia, in Washington, D.C., elsewhere, that are really leading the way in a lot of respects, there are still a lot of libraries that need more support, more help in defining their vision and moving it forward. And those libraries that need help means that there are communities that need help. And ultimately, what this is about isn't just about seeing libraries transformed, but it's about seeing communities transformed as well. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here. I invite you to contact us with your thoughts and ideas after reading the report. All this input will be very helpful to us as we shape the next set of activities that we conduct under the dialogue. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to our panel.